Okay, so happy to be here to discuss today the evolution and diversity of the developer population and how you can use that effectively in DevRel. Before I do that, very short intro to who we are, because I'm going to show you a lot of numbers today, so I'm sure you want to understand where this came from. So we are SlashData. Our mission is to help the world understand developers. We run research, we survey developers, and based on that, we help developer-facing organizations understand who developers are, what technologies they buy, and where they're going next in terms of emerging platforms. These are just a handful of our clients, so all the large tech organizations facing developers. And how we do that, we run 2 surveys per year. We reach more than 30,000 developers annually from more than 159 countries each time. We use more than 87 partners across the globe every single time, not the same 87, because we want to reach all pockets of population out there, from small meetups to large vendor orgs. We research 10 development areas, which you see here on the left. We do that every time, as we want to capture the full activity of developers across the board. And then we also ask DevRel practitioners how they access developers. Now, today, we're going to cover these 4 things. 1, how many developers there are in the world, regional communities, how to segment developers, and DevRel practices. First of all, how many developers in the world? There are currently 21 million. I'm sorry, give me a second. The population has grown more than 26% in 2 years, and we expect that to grow to 24 million. So, not all communities are the same. They grow in different pace. North America is the largest one, 4.7 million, followed by Europe and East Asia. However, this is a dynamic mix that can change as they evolve differently. Here I show you the evolution of Asia. As you can see, Asia has grown faster in the beginning, plus 50% in the first 2 years, while the rest of the world grew by only 18%. Currently, Asia is growing at a slower pace, 11%, while the rest of the world has caught up. This has happened for different reasons, and it's very important to understand why different communities grow in different ways. This will help you do effective DevRel. Regional communities can be different in many ways. One way is on the tooling that they use. And here I can show you just a small example of how different regional communities use different tooling. As you can see, so we asked in our survey what APIs developers use, and we asked about 17 different third-party APIs, also private, internal, or not using at all. As you can see, there are very, very big differences. Middle East and Africa, that is growing faster than anyone else, are using the most, so 77%. Of course, across all regions, the majority of developers use this API, but that's very different from Middle East and Africa, that is 77, to East Asia, that's only 61. You have to understand what is behind these differences to use this information. So, for example, in East Asia, we know it's about what developers do. So they're more likely to be working in large tech organizations that are in turn more likely to be using private internal APIs, or they're working on projects that involve low coding, such as robotics, and therefore they do not want to use APIs, but rather get their hands dirty with low coding. So this is just one very, very small example of how regions can be different in terms of technologies. However, it's not just the technologies per se on which they are different, but on how decisions are made as to what technologies to use. So we also ask developers if and how they are involved in the tooling decisions. And here I'm showing you how this was answered by developers in East Asia versus South Asia versus the rest of the world. So the first thing to notice, for example, is that in South Asia, half of the developers are not making any tooling decisions, to purchase any tools at all. Either they don't buy tools at all or they're not involved. And we know that what lies behind this is the young age, or otherwise that they're very junior developers. So we have, not all of them, of course, we have a higher proportion of junior developers in South Asia as compared to the rest of the world. And of course, as such, either they don't buy tools, they use free solutions, or they are not involved in the decisions. In that regard, East Asia is similar to the rest of the world, so 36% don't make any decisions. But the way in which East Asia is different is to the degree that they influence decisions. What I mean by that? So if you look at the bottom here, which is really that 7% there at the bottom, is the same across all regions. So that's the top of the hierarchy, the decision makers. So across the world, there are about 7% in any whatever region that they actually call the shots, that they approve the overall budgets, they approve the overall expenses. What is different in East Asia is below that level, below that top management level. The developers, which is, of course, the biggest mass of developers, right? And in this case, in East Asia, it seems that they are more influential than they are in the rest of the world. They also buy more as individuals, as you can see, which means that as individuals, they have higher requirements, most likely, that are not covered by the free solutions out there. So it's important to understand these kind of things, how much influence they have. Now, it's not just the technologies or how they select those technologies, how they decide to buy technologies, but it's also what kind of support they need. In our survey, we asked developers what kind of support they expect from vendors. So basically, that's very closely related to DevRel and what you should be offering them. And we asked developers about 20 different types of support. Here I'm showing you 5 of those 20 and how regions are different. So this is how many developers consider these types of support important. And we have documentation and sample code is, for example, very important to most developers out there. But in Asia, as you can see, both East and South, this is less important than it is in the rest of the world. And similarly, but not as dramatically, for answers in public forums. However, things such as internships and hackathons and even mentorship that I'm not showing here are far more important in South Asia than the rest of the world. And that is because, again, we have quite a few students there and many junior developers who value this kind of things. On the other hand, in East Asia, we have marketplaces that are double as important to developers there as compared to the rest of the world. So this is just to demonstrate that developers in different parts of the world choose different tooling. They have different kinds of support needs, and they influence all the decision-making to a different degree. Now, yet, even though there are such differences, DevRel practitioners do not, in their majority, differentiate their strategy geographically. So in our DevRel survey, as I said, we run 2 surveys. One is for developers and the other is for DevRel practitioners. We get something like 60 to 80 to 100 responses from those, and we ask them what sort of practices they have. So if you can see here, 41% said they don't have any geographic differentiation, while another 11% they simply localize the content, but otherwise they don't geographically differentiate their services. And that's the majority, therefore, 52%. And you have only 14% of people who actually have regional teams in place. So based on what I showed you, this is not a great idea, not doing something different in regions. It's not just a matter of localizing content, it's also a matter of catering to the different needs of each region. But it's not just a matter of region. it's developers, behind those regional differences, there lie other factors that differentiate developers. So we strongly recommend that you should be segmenting your audience. First of all, we asked if and how they segment their developer audience, the DevRel practitioners, and thankfully 80% say they do. However, still we have nearly 1 in 5, so 19%, who don't segment their audience. Even those who do segment it, several of them do use things such as technology to define their segments and their personas, which is not a very good idea, as I will show you in a minute. So you can see here that people use industry, app category, type of development, devices targeted, and so on. So why segment, first of all? Here I'm just using a very simple messaging. This is just a simple illustration to explain. On the left, suppose this is all your developer population out there, and they are different. They have different motivations, different goals. They're trying to build different things. And yet, in a non-segmented approach, DevRel's teams will approach them not with a single message. This is very simplistic, but with a single messaging campaign. So they will say the same thing to everyone. Even if it's multiple campaigns, it's just targeted to everyone in the same way. And given that, you will get X% response. Some of what you have to say in this way will be interesting to some people, so you will get some response. If, however, you were to break this population down into smaller clusters, and those clusters were very similar, so the members within each of those clusters was very similar to each other. So here, in the simplistic example here, you put all the blue diamonds together, and then all the green rectangles together, and the red triangles together, and then you design your message. So you say, instead of having a single approach to your outreach, if you adjust that to the target cluster, then it will be more efficient. So if you design a message for the blue diamonds in particular, then more members in that group will be interested because they're similar. So in that way, you have multiple response than what you would have in each one of those groups, and therefore higher response altogether. Therefore, it's a case of multiplying, not just increasing your ROI. And how do you do that? So there's a lot to be said here. I will only tell you some very key principles. So first of all, your segments must be homogeneous. That means that within each persona's definition or segment, you have to have similarly behaving members. So they have to, why do you want to do that? So that you can predict the response, and you have, they are bound to respond the same way, react the same way, given a message. So you want to be homogeneous so that you know how they're going to react. You also want those groups to be distinct. So you want to not to have any overlaps, so that you can target them with very clear messaging each. If they overlap, at the end of the day, it beats the purpose. It's as if having the same single population where you started off. Exhaustive means that if you put all those segments together, it has to cover, if not 100%, but as a rule of thumb, at least 90% of your population. So you don't want to leave out any important parts of your population. You want also to use in your definition attributes or features that are not, let's say, that do not include what you're trying to predict. This is why technology is a bad choice for segmentation. So if you're trying, for example, to predict who is more likely to use tool X versus tool Y, you do not want to include usage of tool X in your definition, because it beats your purpose. You will be going around in circles. Another very important thing is to use features in your segmentation that you can observe, so in real life. So for example, I've seen cases where people use revenue as part of their segment definition. So developers who make between $1,000 and $3,000. Okay, that's fine in terms of definition. However, can you easily observe that out there when you go out there and actually target developers? Is it something that is easy to observe? Maybe not. So you have to be careful there. And final thing is to come up with segments that are easy to describe and visualize, because remember, what you come up with will not be used in a recommendation system in this case, or it won't be machine readable. It's going to be used by marketing teams. So they need to understand what you're telling them, and they can visualize it, and then they can use it in the campaigns. So these are the key principles of segmentation. And okay, we said that DevRel practitioners currently, they don't differentiate regionally that much. Segmentation, some do it, some don't do it, and not very well. So what do? We ask them what sort of activities they do and what takes most of their budget, time, or effort. And we found that, of course, other than creating a developer strategy, that is, of course, quite important, other than that, the most popular activities are the ones that have to do with developer engagement. So either creating portals to communicate with developers, or directly engaging them, or organizing events. Now, we're not saying this is of course good practice, right? This is what you should be doing, and all the operational activities are right at the bottom. But what I'm trying to say here is that, okay, so these activities take quite a lot of your time and of your budget. You should therefore be putting some thought as to how you allocate that budget to the right activities. And therefore, the question is, are these activities effective? So what we've done, as I said, on the one hand, we have asked developers what they value in terms of the support that that vendors offer, or DevRel teams offer, if you want. On the other hand, we asked DevRel teams where they spend their money. And here we cross the two. So what I'm showing you here is the rank. So the red lines is how DevRel teams spend, how important this kind of spending is for DevRel teams. So the rank of their budget spent. And the blue-green lines are what developers think, how they rank this kind of activity. So the most striking thing here is about conferences and events. So while vendors place a lot of effort, time, and money into organizing events, even now, developers, especially in Asia, don't consider that very important. It's not at the top of the priorities. We're not saying that you shouldn't be running events. Of course you should. They have their uses, definitely. However, it's a matter of priorities here. It's a matter how you prioritize your budget spent. And what we see here, that this conference really rank high in the priorities of DevRel practitioners, but really low, especially in East Asia. So out of 20, remember we asked about 20, and for East Asian developers, conferences rank at the very bottom. And then with other kind of activities, we have a similar case. And for example, we have the opposite thing for marketplaces for East Asia, where developers actually rank marketplaces as their 8th most important type of resource, a type of support, while it's the 16th in terms of priority for DevRel practitioners. And there's a similar misalignment for access to devices and hackathons. So this is why you should be looking into how exactly you want to spend your budget on DevRel. So that begs the question, how do DevRel teams actually decide to spend money on the DevRel activities, on developer program to begin with, and then how to allocate that money? So we asked that very question, and we found that 1 in 3 actually use qualitative argumentation. Of course, the most popular answer was as part of product development investment, which makes sense. However, 1 in 3 said that they just use qualitative arguments. And another 16% here, it's at the bottom, but still it's quite high as a percentage, actually are struggling to find the right arguments. So you really need data to do this. First, to calculate the gain that an onboarded developer brings. That will give you an idea of the value you can expect to get, and therefore how much money to spend in DevRel overall. And then you need this data to understand where and how to allocate this money. because to avoid what I just showed you of the misalignment between what developers expect from you versus where you place your money. Now, you also need data to measure how effective your efforts were. And we asked the practitioners what kind of KPIs they use. We track main KPIs. I'm here showing you the top 5 for 2 different activities, DevRel and Dev Marketing. We also have Dev Tooling. It's another 5 at the top there as well. What I'm trying to say is, obviously, with Dev Tooling, you may have different metrics. But what about Dev Marketing versus DevRel? Here, again, it's not the same set. If you see, the only one that exists in both lists is awareness via surveys, and it ranks differently. For Dev Marketing, for Dev Relationships, it's at the top. For Dev Marketing, it's somewhere lower. So you can see that for Dev Marketing, in mostly things that have to do with social interaction, video views, YouTube subscriptions, and so on, while for Dev Relations, it's registered developers, it's more telemetry, analytics, and so on. So you shouldn't be assuming that you need the same set of KPIs. Again, this is a case where you should be getting the right data to do the work. Now, that's all I had for you for today. I note that you can go to our website there, devrelx.com, where you find lots of free data related to DevRel. And there's also a book, it's the 3rd edition. We are not the authors. We have 24 authors from industry-leading companies that share their experiences and challenges with DevRel. So I think it's a good first step for those of you who are perhaps new to the DevRel game. And that's all for me today. Any questions?
Yeah, thank you, Christina. We have the 2 questions for you. Okay, first one is, what makes SlashData superior to other companies as a data analysis services?
Thank you.
Especially, how should you use SlashData?
Okay. All right. So first of all, there are a few things. So unfortunately, I don't have that slide to pull it now. But what makes us different? A few things. One, we survey, as I said, 30,000 developers across the globe. So it's a large survey. And that number does not come from just a single panel. So every time we survey different populations out there, there's only about 10% the same people from survey to survey, and we want them to be there so that we can track evolution. But otherwise, it's a fresh population. And that is kind of unique. So it's not a panel that we survey every time, it's different people. And even though it's a different population, we get a very stable trend. So it's not random up and down, which means that we actually get a representative sample of the population. So that's one way. It is the ground truth. Another way is that, as I say, we're not in the data business, we're in the data-backed insights business. So we don't just dump data on you, we help you make sense of this data, understand the so what, the why behind the data. There's much more if there's more that you'd like to know.
Yeah, exactly. The huge survey is a very advantage for your company.
Yeah, and it's the breadth of the sample. It's not one panel, it's many communities out there, so that we make sure we capture the views of every type of community of developers out there, from enterprise developers to young hobbyists, everyone.
Yeah, I see. Exactly. All right, thank you. And next question, questionnaire said that I feel that usually developer evangelists and developer advocates are more likely to belong to the developer team than marketing. But which is better to be categorized them as marketing or developers? Actually, this original questions, the more question sentences from your session. uh, he or she get the impression the developer relations is a kind of marketing. So, questionnaire, get this question for you.
It's better to categorize as marketing. Therefore, is that the question? If it's the same thing as the marketing, no, and that's why I showed you those KPIs at the end to show you that it's not the same thing.
Yeah.
DevRel is more about engaging developers directly.
Right, exactly.
That's why I also showed you what are the top activities of DevRel teams, which have to do with directly engaging developers and finding them to speak. Knowing where to find them to speak to them is very important. So, but that also is changing regionally. So, in some part of the world, developers are mostly to be found in forums like Stack Overflow or wherever else. While in other places, it's open source communities, for example.
Right,
So,
exactly.
no, DevRel is about understanding where to find developers, engaging them directly with the right messaging. That's very different than dev marketing. That is very broad and, marketing your technology in general. Very different things.
Well, I think so. In my company case, it's very similar with you. I got it. Thank you. Okay. So, thank you again. Thank you for your great session. It seems no more questions on Twitter and YouTube live chat. If we find any questions for your session, after that, we will let you know that directly. All right. I would like to bring the session to a close. Thank you again.
Thank you. Bye-bye.